Hey everybody on YouTube. My name is Kendra. I like to make things mostly out of art, and right now I'm really into creating things that are narrative. So this is part 2 of a little series that I'm putting together about how to create original art using your reference photos. My first video was well received, except that the audio I think was not quite up to par. So today I have a nice mic plugged in to my camera, and so I can be heard. So I want to share with you a little bit of what I did at the end or after I completed the last video on the image that I was working on before. And then I want to share some story ideas so that you can also think about or start to think about putting together a narrative of your own. I think that it is quite a jump. I mean, I feel like for those of us who are in the place of creating work, that have gotten to a place where you feel happy about taking an image and making something in whatever media you use, watercolor, gouache, acrylic, collage, and you make something that you like, but you're now at the place where you're like, how can I take the thing or take a bunch of images and create something that starts to tell a story or evoke a feeling or really depart from the image that I'm starting with and create it into something completely new. Like, that's exactly where I'm exploring right now with my art, and that's if you're in that exact spot, like, you share your ideas and I'll share mine. I'm so happy to be in this space with you. So anyway, here's what I came up with after the end of our last call. I thought I would work on something, and I can't show my face while I do this because my camera will look at it. Something that shows or maybe ask the question of, what is this little bird looking for in this lit up house on this snowy night in the dark? That's the story there, or that's the question there. And then I thought, well, it doesn't have to be a house, right? Maybe I can take this one that is a watercolor that I did on a scrap of paper some time back from a little creek side. If I take that and put the bird in there. So here we have the start of something here. And if you see, it's not finished clearly. It doesn't have the background. I want to create a sense of depth here with the trees in the back. And yeah, I need to work on the top here, but I'm finding it quite interesting. How do you go from just an image that you have somewhere to creating sense of narrative or a sense of place? I do want to show you. I did this in a Patreon session with Sarah Dyer, and I was surprised that I could, because going into it I thought, ooh, this is going to be a challenge. She posted a bunch of different photographs, mostly of cats, which are not my go-to animal to illustrate, doing things. And then the idea was that all of us who were in her group would figure out a narrative by kind of combining these photographs or looking at these photographs and kind of trying to piece something together in our heads. I thought, oof, this isn't going to work for me, but it did, and it's kind of cute what came up. So it starts here. Okay, it starts here. I don't want my face in it so that I can, but I do want you to see it. There we go. That's nice and clear. So the idea of my story is that there is a cat for whom there's a birthday, and then there is a cat that wants to pick up like a birthday present and some cake and maybe invite some kitty friends over. So this cat gets on its scooter and goes first to the cake store where the proprietor is a cat. So they're selling cat birthday cakes. Then okay, so since the cat is on his scooter, the package of the birthday cake gets wrapped up and put on the scooter. And as the cat is zooming down the street, he sees his kitty friends at a dining, and he says, oh, so-and-so's having a birthday, come over later. And he keeps going and he finds the yarn shop. And at the yarn shop, of course, the proprietor is another cat. And so he picks out some colors of yarn for his cat friend. And now he has the cake and the yarn on the back of his scooter. And he passes another friend who's sitting on the lap of his person. And if if I had more than an hour to work on this, I would think it would be pretty funny to have piles and piles of things on the back of the scooter that are the different things, or possibly even some of the friends join on so that you have cats hanging off of all parts of the scooter, perhaps, who are coming to the birthday party. But we were getting ready to wrap it up, so I wrapped it up by showing just the two of them with the birthday cake and the yarn in the upper story window with the shutters. So it's a quick way to come up with the start of a narrative, or the idea that you can take some images from anywhere. Those ones are from probably Pexels or somewhere. Sarah Dyer found them on a royalty-free website, and create something that is unique and different, and starting to create a narrative or a story to go with it, with the work. Now you might say, well, Kendra, that's good and well for you, but how can I start to work on how to create a picture that is a mashup of two ideas, or starts to create a narrative? Like, where do I even start? And I think that you start by being curious. So if you start to think, like I was just thinking, what could I do to demonstrate on YouTube, like how to start this, or how I am starting to approach this, because I'm really only at the very beginning of figuring this out. So I'm looking outside my window right now, and I'm seeing my tulips, and I'm seeing euphorbia, and I'm seeing the flowers that come at the top of kales and collards. And these are all very different types of flowers. So the question that comes up for me immediately is, how do our pollinators find these different flowers? Because they all have to be pollinated in order for them to bloom and grow and fruit, or whatever this they're going to do. How does that happen? So I thought, this could be an interesting storybook or narrative idea of trying to show what does the bee see? What does the bee see? That could be a story. What does the bee see? And if you start to look around, you might find, as I did, an article by the Royal Society Publishing.org that tells about how bees do see and what they see, and how they distinguish a flower from something outside of a flower. And if you're ever around little kids, well, even adults do this, but we get quite anxious if there's a bee hovering around us, and probably it's the pattern in our clothing that is creating that kind of interest. Because clearly it's not the odor, it's not the fragrance or smell that is attracting the bees. Mosquitoes, that's a whole different item, isn't it? But for bees, it could be the contrast in our clothing that is creating that interest. So I know for my granddaughters that a subject like that could be quite interesting. Here's another one. Here's another two. I recently found a little story in a lending library and read it to my 2-year-old granddaughter, Thea. And it's a story about Winchell. It's, I think, called Winchell Cuts the Cheese. And if you're not familiar with American idioms, cutting the cheese means passing gas, or tooting, or farting, or whatever other word is used for that bodily function. And it's about a pig that eats and eats and eats and is constantly cutting the cheese, and how his friends, who are other animals, dogs and things, how they respond to his cutting the cheese and what they say, and maybe what a polite thing is to do when you've cut the cheese. And so it just goes through like a day in the life of a pig. He eats breakfast and he cuts the cheese. He has a picnic and then he cuts the cheese. He does. And kids love this repetition of this thing over and over again. And especially, of course, the way you read a story like that is you say, and then Winchell ate this and that for lunch. And then what happened? What did he do? And of course, any alert 2-year-old would say, cheese, cut the cheese, which is, of course, exactly as my granddaughter did. And she needs to have this over and over again. And then just this weekend, we were over at their house, and her mother, my daughter, was telling me about how even if you have a silent one, but Thea perceives it and smells it, she will be like, excuse you, cut the cheese. Oh my gosh, I was laughing to the point of tears because apparently Thea called her mother out in public. So then there was another idea. So that's an idea that has already been written up, but it was quite clever, I thought, because it required this repetition of something that can happen kind of over and over again, which is, of course, what probably kids who are between 2 and 6, honestly, love that repetition in a story where they can kind of guess what's going to happen next. What's the other idea that I was thinking of sharing with you? Besides Winchell who cuts the cheese. Oh, it'll come back to me in a bit. So if you start with that curiosity, another idea did come to me. So I'm going to show you footage of a hike that we went on recently, which is one of the most unique hikes that I have ever been on. It is it's called the Pipeline Trail, and it's out in Hood River, Oregon, and it's along the Hood River. So there's a river that comes down from Mount Hood that is named Hood River by the white settlers who came there. And it drains out into the Columbia, which is the border. If you're not familiar with the Northwest, the Columbia River is the border between Washington and Oregon, and it flows out into the Pacific River. It's an enormous river, and there's dams across it that provide most of the electricity for this area. So it's a very important river for electricity. It also has important for salmon. It's important for waterway for goods coming up and down. I used to know somebody who worked at Tidewater Barge Company, and they, quite interestingly, they bring grain from the interior, from like Idaho, eastern Washington. They go up the Snake as well. They bring grain from those areas and they bring it out on their barges. And then when they drop it off at the port in Portland, they pick up, of all things, jet fuel. And jet fuel, of course, there's a different part of the boat for the jet fuel. There's like a part that is for the grain and then another part that is for the jet fuel. They pick up jet fuel with the same barge, different container, different part of the container that holds it, and they send the jet fuel back up the river, because that's how the airports in, I suppose, Boise or any of the other little smaller airports that need that very special refined fuel, that's how they get it. Anyway, long diversion. We were talking about a hike up along the Hood River that's on a pipeline. So this pipeline was decommissioned some years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and as part of some deal, that land is now part of a community land trust, some kind of a thing like that, and it provides access to Hood River to us, the public. And I think that a good portion of the people who use this are fly fishermen. We have a lot of fly fishers in Oregon that are up and down the Sandy River and up and down the Hood River. And so, and in fact, we saw some when we were out there, even though it was mid-March when we went out there. No, it was April 5th when we went out there. So it was early April, and there were already fly fishers. They weren't catching anything, but they were out there in their waders, getting into that cold water that is, of course, coming off of snow. Can you hear the dump truck? Coming right off of the snow melt on Mount Hood. So there could be a very interesting story talking about that hike. You could tell it to a child and talk about just the experience of walking on a catwalk above a 9-foot diameter pipe. And I guess you could show it in a number of different ways, like your sense of space in the world. Like, you know, a child might not understand that the pipe below is actually hollow. And so you might draw a cross section of the pipe with the child on the catwalk up above. Or, you know, you might look at it from a sky view. Like, how would that look if you're having a drone footage from up above? Like, how would that look with the pipe that is going along the side of the river and at one point crossing up over the river? Like, just repeating the experience of that. Or you could even make it a bit educational, where you're talking about why that pipe is there, or what other things that go along on a riverbank, on the river edge. So what am I thinking? I'm thinking that it might be fun to do it a little bit together, to take a couple of images and put them up on the screen, and I'll show you what I can get up to with these images. And if you utilize these images, just hashtag Dwebuga. And if you don't know how to spell it, I don't blame you. I will put it in the description below. That's my last name, and it'll be really easy to distinguish on Instagram, hashtag Dwebuga, because who else is using that name? Hardly anybody. Okay, I'll put up a couple of images, and we will make a little story out of that together. So now you've seen some of the photos that I've picked out, and we're going to try and do the thing with the bees and how they see. And we're going to start by using the footage from my own yard. I'm going to use this sketchbook that's almost finished, but I will tell you what, give you 5 brownie points if you can identify the YouTuber who is drawn here. Yeah. Good luck. It's a small clue down here, but not really. So I'm going to just start by warming up my hand with some colored pencils and maybe some paints. And I'm going to put this on time lapse, so it's just going to look really fast to you. But that's all I'm going to start with, is warming up my hands with images that I have. And I'm just going to start drawing things next to one another and seeing how they might unfold. So it's going to be very intuitive and free, and not something that I'm planning out necessarily beforehand, right? My hands are going to do the thinking for me here. So, all right, here we go on speed dial on high speed time lapse. just seen a very short clip of the time-lapse photography of what I've been painting. So I started by just really looking at the images I could find. First of all, the image that I have, and then, the image that I have, and then some images that I found on Pexels. And finally, this guy. So you'll notice that the first 4 little paintings, little quick paintings, are not even a mashup of anything. That's because I'm just getting my hands warm and letting my hands work so that my brain can think. And so by the time I got to the 4th picture, I think it's the 4th picture. Oh no, there's even a 5th picture here. By the time I got to the 5th drawing, which was this one, I started having ideas. So I started by thinking, bees find great big sunflowers. That's one of the pictures. Bees find teeny tiny flowers on trees. That was the 2nd picture. And then I thought, bees' eyes up close. So have you ever seen a bee up close, or have you ever looked a bee in the eye? Could be the next narrative. And then with that, it could be like, have you ever looked a bee in the eye? Could be like a bee on an optometrist chair getting an eye exam. Like, how interesting would that be to have like the image of the optometrist with a little bee hovering right there with the big glasses on? Or have you ever looked a bee in the eye? I could see a child. You could look for a picture of a child maybe like laying down in the garden, or on a like on a hammock. A child on a hammock reading a book would be the thing I would look for, and then I would replace the book with a bee so that you have the child looking the bee in the eye. Yeah. So then I started thinking, what does the bee actually see? Because I was seeing the hexagon pattern of their beehive and thinking, I wonder why it's hexagons. Does that have something to do with how they see? And I don't know yet. That's where the curiosity is going to take me. But I found a book called What the Bees See by Craig B. Burrows, and it's published by Chronicle Books in San Francisco. And I downloaded it. I borrowed it from my library and downloaded it on Kindle, and there are a bunch of photographs. So I'm going to look at those now. And it's afternoon, so I need to prepare dinner because everyone's going to come home hungry. But I'm going to leave all of that here and continue on with another video in the future so I can get this up and out and continue the conversation. Thank you so ever much for all of your comments, lovely comments, and thumbs up and all that kind of stuff. All right, I will see you in the next one. Actually, that's a total lie. I never see anybody, but you'll see me in the next one. Have a good day.